Let's bring on board my colleague Nayanthara Rai. She joins in with all the exclusive details. Big news and a big breather for some of these foreign law firms. Nayanthara, let's start off with the basics. What exactly are you picking up?
This is the big ET Now exclusive. We do understand from our sources the Prime Minister himself personally is dead serious about allowing the entry of foreign law firms in India. He believes this is the time. He's got this feedback from various investors, foreign investors on all his foreign trips as well, and those that keep coming to the country, that they want to work with the lawyers that they are comfortable with. Remember, this is a very controversial issue. The Indian law firms have always been resisting it tooth and nail, but the Prime Minister deciding to take the bold reform of allowing foreign law firms to enter the country. In fact, I do understand that there was a high-profile meeting that recently took place, which was called by none other than the Law Minister, Ravi Shankar Prasad, where he met with a whole host of domestic law firms. And I'm talking about the biggest of the law firms you have in the country, whether it's an AZB, a Luthra and Luthra, Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas, Jyoti Sagar Associates, which is called JSA, Shardul Shahs, which is Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. So as you can see, some of the biggest law firms in the country did meet with the Law Minister. I'm told the Commerce Secretary was also part of that meeting. And the instruction is very clear from the Prime Minister's office to the Law Minister and to the Commerce Minister. He wants the draft notifications allowing the foreign law firms to set up shop in the country in 4 weeks' time. That's when the draft notification should be ready, Avan.
Okay, so that means that it could become a reality fairly soon, Nayanthara?
It's certainly looking like that, because if the Prime Minister's office is pushing for the draft notification to come in, within 4 weeks' time, clearly the government is serious and has its intent very clear. Foreign law firms will be allowed into the country. I should also point out that maybe because of all the resistance that is likely to come in from the domestic firms and how it's going to completely rewrite the legal fraternity, change the rules of the game, maybe you're going to see a phased entry of the foreign firms. So what I'm being told from my sources is, and this is what was discussed at that high-profile meeting that I told you about, that and I do understand that the senior leadership from all of the leading law firms was informed in no other way about it, that the Prime Minister is serious about it. It is going to happen. So how should this be done? So what they discussed was allowing the foreign firms to come in a phased manner, where they would first be practicing in India for arbitration, for foreign law, that is to advise foreign companies that you have in the country doing business here on laws. And the third one, that they would be allowed to set up shop in SEZs like the Gift City that is coming up in Gujarat. Gift City is also a project very close to the Prime Minister's heart. It is supposed to be an international finance center. And how can you have an international finance center when the international banks cannot choose the lawyers of their own choice? So that's the rationale that was discussed. I would also like to point out at this juncture that the Bar Council of India has also been told that there are no two ways about it, so it should come on board, and it has been asked to amend its rules to create a level playing field between the foreign firms and the domestic firms. And this should be good news for domestic law firms. They may very soon be allowed to advertise and market their services in the country. They're not allowed to do that as yet. So the Bar Council of India may amend the rules to create the parity, so that the domestic law firms also don't start feeling insecure about not being competitive enough, that they're allowed to market their services to the foreign players as well. So that could be the other big change that you see. But that's the big headline. Expect it. It's happening. You're going to see foreign firms coming to the country, foreign law firms. It may be in a phased manner. Initially, they may only be allowed for arbitrations and to be setting up in SEZs like the Gift City.
Okay, so, you highlighted, Nayanthara, names of some of the big law firms. How are they back home? How are the Indian law firms reacting to this development?
The leading law firms in the country, especially those that are into corporate law, are obviously very unhappy about this move. In fact, I do understand that at that meeting with Ravi Shankar Prasad, most of them said that do not allow the foreign law firms to practice in the courts and do not allow them to hire Indian lawyers. Because the minute you have foreign law firms being allowed to hire here, a lot of the law graduates, a lot of the younger ones will want to switch over. They may want to choose over just for the expertise, hoping maybe that they'll get overseas postings, etc., etc. They are not happy about it. And I imagine this: if you're a foreign company and you can work with the same law firm that you work in your domicile country, why would you choose an Indian law firm, right? So that's obviously a fear of the domestic law firms, but it's not cutting it with the government. They're not listening to them. They're pretty clear that it is going to happen. And the domestic law firms, and I spoke to a lot of the partners that were actually present at this meeting with Ravi Shankar Prasad, and they also conceded, yes, in phase one, it may only be for arbitration. They may be only allowed to set up shop to try and advise the foreign companies on Indian law or international law. But they're also making peace with the fact and coming to terms with the fact that very soon there will be full-blown entry of foreign law firms in the country. In fact, Avan, let's take this forward. Joining us on the phone line is Harish Salve, the legal eagle. He is, of course, a senior lawyer at the Supreme Court. Good evening, Mr. Salve. Appreciate you joining us here, the big ET Now exclusive. We are being told the Prime Minister has instructed the Law Ministry and the Commerce Ministry to have a draft notification ready in 4 weeks' time, which will allow the entry of foreign law firms. It's going to be done in a phased manner. Phase one for arbitration and for SEZs to be practicing in. My first question to you is that how bold a reform is this, and is this maybe too little too late?
I'm happy you've asked me. I hope the government is getting both points of view. I consider the fact that foreign law firms have so far been obstructed from setting up practice in India to be one of the most unfortunate ways in which certain members of my fraternity have created a scare to preserve their own turfs, I'm sorry to say, to use very mild language. First of all, let's be clear, what do you mean by saying foreign law firms practicing in India? The impression given to the common lawyer who then gets upset is that you will have English and American and German and French and Austrian lawyers flying down to argue bail applications and divorce cases and rent tax cases. Certainly not. Nobody is interested in your litigation practice. How will foreign law firms work in India? Foreign law firms will work in India like the foreign accountancy firms have worked. They will hire Indian lawyers directly. Today, how does a foreign law firm for a foreign client get work done in India? They go to an Indian law firm who hires junior lawyers to do the work. And the bulk of the fees is retained by the senior partners. If the foreign firm comes in, the foreign firm will set up its own bunch of Indian lawyers. Now, that has two huge advantages. One is that you directly get hired by the foreign firm. The second huge advantage is Indian lawyers then will get to work with global firms, and that will be a fantastic training for Indian lawyers. Within 5-7 years' time, Indian lawyers will be not just intellectually, which we are on par with everybody, but even practice and culture-wise, we'll be on par with everybody else. The most ridiculous thing is, if, say, Apple wants to do a deal with, tomorrow wants to do a deal with an Indian company, a manufacturer of phones, you're very happy to have the, say that let's have the meeting in New York or in California, because the Indian lawyer can fly to California with the Indian client and give advice. But if Apple says, I want to fly my legal team down to India, you say, no, the legal team is practicing in India. So you can't bring a foreign lawyer, you must come to an Indian lawyer. Now, this is not what is at all something which is acceptable. Your doctor and your lawyer are people of your confidence. Indians, when they want to do business with people abroad, prefer Indian lawyers. Why? Because you have a sense of confidence with the lawyers who do your work on a day-to-day basis. We are wanting their investment, we are wanting their participation, but we are denying them something as basic as their own legal consultation, which I think is ridiculous. So I hope the government doesn't delay this anymore and opens up. And let's be very clear of what you mean by opening up. The Advocates Act applies. Unless you are a qualified advocate in India, you cannot step into an Indian court. And believe me, nobody is interested in Indian litigation practice in its generality. Yes, if you have a law firm, if you have a Freshfields or a Clifford Chance or a Baker McKenzie here, they will have Indian lawyers who will work for them, like the KPMGs and the Deloittes have Indian chartered accountants who work for them.
Mr. Salve, very pertinent points that you've raised, and from everything you're saying, I now don't understand why your legal fraternity is scared at all. And the fact that the Prime Minister is quite adamant about it, and you're making a case for the fact that maybe this should not be done in a phased manner, it should be totally liberalized in one way. That's the sense I'm picking up from what you're saying.
Nanda, I'm not saying it in a different way. I'm saying it front on. We don't want foreigners coming into India, whether for business or this, because we Indians are great. We are the best on the planet, and we have everything between. Okay, that's one point of view, which obviously is a point of view the government doesn't share. So let's leave out that point of view. We are in a point of view where we want to globalize. You create panic amongst the younger lawyers by saying, oh my God, the foreign lawyers will come and flood. Ask a common lawyer, especially those who practice in all the cities of India, how many commercial cases do they do? Do you think a Freshfields or a Baker McKenzie or a Skadden or a Clifford Chance who's going to set up office is interested in doing rent act cases, is interested in doing land dispute cases, is interested in doing Panchayati Raj cases, they are interested in doing bails? I mean, come on. What are you about? So, when you say foreign law firms come in, the foreign, your KPMGs are here, Deloitte and Touche is here, right? PwC is here. Your average chartered accountant is without work.
That's right. And, like you said initially that you want FDI, but you don't want the investors to have the lawyers that they are most comfortable with. The lawyers are like doctors. Mr. Salve, you're very often consulted on a whole host of issues by the government. So if you were to be, taken on board for your advice, what would you advise the government? How should this controversial reform be rolled out? Because, as you know it, and as we've been reporting here as well, the domestic law firms are resisting this. They do not want the foreign law firms to set up base here. So how best can the government do it so everybody's happy and everybody stands to gain as well, including the law students and young lawyers?
When I was Solicitor General and a delegation of British lawyers came and met me, I said, look, the only thing we look for is reciprocity. And now I realize there is complete reciprocity. If an Indian law firm wants to go and set up practice overseas, and an Indian lawyer, if he gives a commitment, I will not practice English law, can practice in the UK. And if he's a barrister, if he's a solicitor, he can practice in the UK. And they have conversion courses, which we don't have. Do a conversion course, you can go and practice. A complete reciprocity. We are the only people who have these high walls against people coming in, and that's why, because we want it to be the preserve of a handful of people. And that's wrong, If we are globalizing, why should my profession be denied the benefit of globalization? Can you imagine if tomorrow recruitments are started by the Freshfields and the Clifford Chances and the Slaughters and May and the Bakers and McKenzies and the Skaddens? Who's going to gain out of it? And can you imagine if between the 20 top law firms of the world, they hire 2,000 Indian youngsters who will then become globalized lawyers? Whose future are we stealing?
That's great. At a time when we're talking about how there are not enough jobs, you're saying this is one reform that can help create jobs as well, give exposure to the young lawyers. My next question to you, Mr. Salve, is that can this also help in making India a global arbitration seat? Why should all of Indian companies and foreign companies doing business here have to go to Singapore or Malaysia or London?
Let's go by the Singaporean example. There was a time Singapore didn't allow foreign lawyers to come in and practice, correct? Even in arbitrations. They had to give that up. And now Singapore allows foreign lawyers to come and do arbitration work. And Singapore has now become one of the world's largest arbitration centers. So that's extremely important. If India has to become a global center for arbitration, two things are necessary. Three things. Superior telecom facilities. Our telecom facilities are still not up to the mark. Transcription facilities, which we can train very easily, which we will get. And the third thing is, you need complete liberty to be given to foreign lawyers to come and do arbitrations in India. I mean, our courts have revised their attitude. Indian courts have stopped interfering in arbitration work. The biggest fear is also challenge to the award, but that's the thing which the law has fixed now. So challenge to a domestic award, the courts will be very reticent in going into it. Today, if there is a dispute between a Chinese and a Korean, and they want to settle it in India, our court should be extremely gentle in their touch, like the English courts are, not to interfere in arbitration except in extreme cases. So this is the kind of environmental change we need if India has to grow as an arbitration center.
Mrs. Salve, I'm going to leave it at that since we're running out of time. I appreciate you being so candid, taking on your fraternity as well, saying that you're sad that they've been protecting that turf by blocking foreign firms. That's Legal Eagle Harish Salve saying the government should actually go the whole way, not open up entry to foreign law firms in a phased manner. Let's take this forward now. I believe that Gopal Jain, another Supreme Court lawyer, joining us on the phone line. Good evening, Mr. Jain. This is Nayanthara. We're breaking a story here on ET now that the Prime Minister is dead serious about allowing the entry of foreign law firms, that this could be done in a phased manner, beginning with arbitration and foreign law firms advising their clients on foreign law and being present in SEZs. For example, the Gift City in Gujarat. I understand Ravi Shankar Prasad, the law minister, has met a whole host of leading domestic law firms, be it the AZB, JSA, Luthra and Luthra, etc. Mr. Harish Salve was just telling us he hopes that this is not going to be done in a phased manner, that it should be done in completely allow foreign law firms in the country. Where do you stand? It's a very controversial subject. The domestic law firms have been opposing it for a long time.
Well, two things. Firstly, I think it's a step absolutely in the right direction. India is building itself as a hub of international arbitration. And obviously, if you want to be a hub of international arbitration, you need to have the expertise of international arbitration experts. Second, I think that since it's going to be a transformative change, we should do it in phases and steps, because it's equally important to find the right balance when you go from regime 1 to regime 2, so that it happens peacefully and smoothly as a seamless transition, rather than, have ground realities, because we want the objective to be achieved, which is of far more importance than phase-wise. So I think right decision at the right time.
Mr. Jain, I believe at that meeting with the law minister that took place in July, and I've spoken to some of the lawyers that were present at that meeting, one of the subjects that was raised was that foreign law firms should not be allowed to hire Indian lawyers. Do you think that's fair?
Well, it's like this. I think it will make a lot of good sense to have Indian lawyers work with foreign law firms, because they'll also benefit from their larger international experience. And I'll give you one example which always comes to mind. When you did the IPL, it gave an opportunity for young Indian players who had not broken on the international scene to play with global greats, the great iconic cricketers, and that ultimately has created a great talent pool. So my argument always is, if for cricket, why not for law? There can't be a downside to it. And in a sort of free competition environment that we are creating, we shouldn't have any strings attached. So if you have a good, competent lawyer, he's selected by a foreign law firm, that's kudos to him.
Okay, and so you and Mr. Salve seem to be on the same page, and I should tell my viewers that I did reach out to the leading corporate law firms, and most of them didn't want to participate in this story, and they're the ones that don't want, of course, the foreign law firms to hire grads and Indian lawyers here. Gopal Jain, you said that it should perhaps be done in a phased manner. Do you foresee a situation where you're going to see foreign law firms ever being allowed to take part in litigations, to actually practice in Indian courts, or do you think they're not interested and that should never happen either?
I think combination of both. And I think at this point in time, we should focus and savor this decision of the government, if what you reported is in fact the government decision, and work towards its successful implementation, and leave this to another day and another debate. Because, like you said, this is very contentious, and it's a combination of both, according to me, which is why that looks still light years away.
But you do think it's a step in the right direction, right? Because what I'm being told by my sources is that that's what foreign investors have told the Prime Minister, that you want our money, you want FDI, but you don't want us to work with the lawyers that we want to work with. For example, if you look at the United Kingdom or the United States, they don't stop Indian companies from bringing their lawyers there to work with.
Yeah, and look, I'll give you an example closer home. Whenever we talk of in the field of accountancy, we always talk of the big four, right?
Yeah.
Why do we say big four? Because you could have a company in Sweden, let's say they go to EY or PwC or KPMG, they move to India, they want to have the same set of trusted or chosen advisors. So it's the same thing that if you're an American client and you work with, let's say, firm X, and you come to India and they are your advisors and consultants and you would like to have them, you should. So the choice should be built around the investor. He should feel comfortable with his advisors. So it all fits in that if you're looking at increasing FDI, if you're looking at, removing FITV and saying, look, 100% automatic route and building India, as I said, as a hub for commercial international arbitration, then you must allow people to have service providers of their choice. All of that will facilitate the larger purpose and objective. And I think our own law firms and lawyers are so skilled and so talented and competent that they will actually give them a run for their money. It's no longer a situation where there's a disadvantage. I think we have a really good talent pool of outstanding young lawyers. And I think their own experience now in the last 15 to 20 years in India is also good enough. So they'll be able to hold their own.
Right. Okay, Mr. Jain, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us. As we know, the 4 big accounting firms have created a lot of jobs here. Here's another avenue. It could be via law firms as well. The view being that Indian lawyers at par with foreign law firms, so they should not be worried.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.